Daniel had stood in front of kings without flinching. He had walked into situations that killed other men and walked back out calm. But there was one vision, one specific vision God showed him, that put him on the ground, physically ill, exhausted for days. And when he finally recovered enough to ask what it meant, God told him something devastating. You were never meant to understand this. Go your way. What Daniel saw was not for his generation. The question is whether it was meant for yours. There is a moment in Scripture that almost nobody slows down long enough to feel. God speaks to one of the most faithful men who ever lived. A man who had proven himself under pressure that would have destroyed anyone else. And instead of rewarding him with understanding, instead of giving him clarity after everything he had seen, God tells him to do something unusual. Hide it. Not preach it. Not warn anyone. Not stand in the public square and declare what had just been shown to him. Lock it away. Seal the scroll. Close the book. And then God says something that carries the weight of thousands of years inside it. This is not for your generation. That is not a metaphor. Daniel 12 verse 4 states it plainly. The words are to be rolled up and sealed until the time of the end. Not hidden forever. Not destroyed. Sealed. And a seal is not permanent. A seal exists for one reason, because the moment will come when it is meant to be broken. So the question that should be sitting uncomfortably in your mind right now is this. What if that moment is now? Think about what a sealed letter actually means. The words inside it are fully written, fully real, fully intentional. Every detail is already there. But the person holding it cannot read it yet because it was not written for them. It was written for someone else. Someone further down the road. Someone living in a specific set of circumstances that would make the contents of that letter finally make sense. God did not seal this vision because it was incomplete. He sealed it because the generation it was written for had not yet arrived. And here is what most people miss entirely when they read Daniel 12. The seal was always going to break. That was the point. The instruction to seal it was never a permanent closure. It was a divine timestamp. A marker placed on a message that said, not yet, not yet, not yet, until the moment history caught up with the vision. Now consider what that means for the world you are living in right now. Daniel received this vision over 2,000 years ago. Empires have risen and collapsed since then. Wars have reshaped entire continents. Technologies have emerged that Daniel could not have found words for. And through all of it, this vision sat sealed inside Scripture, waiting, patient, untouched by time because it was never meant for any of those centuries. It was meant for a generation that would recognize itself inside the prophecy. Not a generation that would study it from the outside like historians examining an old artifact. A generation that would read the words and feel something shift because the world described inside the vision looks like the world outside their window. That is a specific kind of moment, and it does not arrive accidentally. Here is what makes this impossible to set aside. Daniel was not a man who collapsed easily. He was not someone who fell apart under pressure. So when this particular vision left him physically broken and exhausted on the ground, something about what he saw was different. Something about the weight of it was unlike anything he had carried before. And God's response was not comfort. It was not explanation. It was two words that carry everything. Not yet. So what was in that vision that broke the one man in Scripture who seemed unbreakable? That is exactly where this begins. Before the vision can mean anything, the man who received it has to mean something. Because context matters. And the context here is not background noise. It is the entire point. Daniel was not a sheltered man living inside a protected religious community. He was not surrounded by people who shared his beliefs or reinforced his faith daily. He lived inside one of the most powerful and hostile empires in human history, Babylon. A system built on the worship of other gods, the glorification of human power, and the complete dismissal of the God of Israel. And Daniel not only survived inside that system, he thrived without compromising a single thing that mattered. When the king demanded that his young advisors eat food that violated God's law, Daniel refused. Not loudly, not with a protest, just quietly, firmly, immovably. And God honored it. When every wise man in Babylon was hours from execution because no one could interpret the king's dream, Daniel did not panic. He went home, gathered his friends, and prayed. And God answered. When a law was passed making prayer to anyone but the king a crime punishable by death, Daniel went upstairs, opened his window toward Jerusalem, and prayed anyway. 3 times that day. Same as he always had. The law did not move him. The threat did not move him. This is the man God chose to receive the sealed vision. Not someone fragile. Not someone easily shaken. Someone whose entire life had demonstrated that external pressure could not reach what was anchored internally. And yet, when God showed him this particular vision, the one that would be sealed until the time of the end, Daniel collapsed. His own words describe it. Worn out. Exhausted. Unable to function for days. That detail should stop every reader cold. Because if this vision broke the men who walked out of the lion's den, who stood calm while empires trembled around him, who never once in the entire record of his life showed fear, what was in it? What did God show him that no amount of personal courage or spiritual strength could absorb without cost? The answer is not found in one chapter. It is built across 3 visions that Daniel received across his lifetime, each one narrowing the focus, each one getting closer to a single, specific destination. And the destination is not ancient history. Here is what most people never consider when they read Daniel. These visions were not given to Daniel so that he could understand them. They were given through Daniel so that a future generation could. He was the vessel, not the recipient. The mailman, not the address on the envelope. God chose the most unshakable man he could find to carry something that would have destroyed a lesser person. And even he could barely hold it. Which raises the question that the rest of this is built on. If it took that kind of man just to carry the vision, what does it mean for the generation that has to live inside it? The answer starts with 4 beasts rising out of a churning sea. And what they represent will reframe everything you think you know about the world you are living in right now. Daniel is standing at the edge of a sea, and the sea is not calm. For winds are churning the water from every direction. And out of that churning, 4 creatures rise, one after another. Each one unlike anything in the natural world. Each one more unsettling than the last. This is not poetic decoration. Scripture tells us directly in Daniel 7 verse 17 what these creatures are. 4 kings, 4 kingdoms, real ones. Empires that would dominate human history in sequence, each one reshaping the world it inherited from the one before it. The first beast looks like a lion. But as Daniel watches, something changes. The wings are stripped off. The creature is lifted from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind is given to it. Historians and Bible scholars across centuries have identified this as Babylon, the most dominant empire of the ancient world. A kingdom so absolute in its power that when God wanted to discipline his people, he used Babylon as the instrument. And the image of the wings being stripped and the creature being made human mirrors exactly what happened to Babylon's greatest king, Nebuchadnezzar, who lost his mind, lived like an animal, and was only restored when he lifted his eyes toward heaven. The first beast is Babylon. Verified. Documented. Closed. The second beast looks like a bear. It is raised up on one side, and it has 3 ribs locked in its teeth. This is Medo-Persia, the empire that swallowed Babylon whole. Raised on one side because Persia was always the stronger partner in that alliance. The 3 ribs represent the 3 major powers it crushed on its way to dominance: Egypt, Lydia, and Babylon itself. The second beast is Medo-Persia. Verified. Documented. Closed. The third beast is a leopard. 4 wings on its back. 4 heads. This is Greece. Specifically, it is Alexander the Great, who moved with a military speed the ancient world had never witnessed. The 4 heads are not symbolic imagination. They are history. When Alexander died suddenly at 32 years old, his empire was divided among 4 of his generals. 4 heads. 4 directions. Exactly as Daniel saw it. The third beast is Greece. Verified. Documented. Closed. And then comes the 4th. And everything changes. Daniel does not give this beast an animal name. He cannot. Because there is no animal in creation that captures what he is seeing. He describes it only in terms of what it does. It has large iron teeth. It crushes everything before it. It devours and breaks and tramples whatever is left. And unlike the others, it has 10 horns. Most scholars identify this 4th beast as Rome. And Rome was different from everything that came before it in a way that matters deeply for where this prophecy lands today. Rome did not just conquer territory. Rome restructured civilization itself. It rewrote law. It redefined governance. It embedded its architecture so deeply into the foundations of Western society that we are still living inside it. Legal systems, governmental structures, institutional frameworks, the fingerprints of Rome are on all of it. And Rome never fully fell. It transformed. It shifted shape. It moved from military empire to religious institution to political influence spread across the modern world. But here is where Daniel's vision does something that no historian could have predicted from the outside. While Daniel is watching the 10 horns, something new pushes up among them. A smaller horn. And as it rises, 3 of the original 10 are pulled out by the roots to make room for it. This horn has eyes. Daniel specifically notes that. Eyes like a man. And it has a mouth. And what that mouth does is not military conquest. It is not physical force. It speaks. It boasts. It opens against the Most High God himself with an arrogance that makes the previous empires look modest by comparison. And then Daniel 7 verse 25 delivers a description of what this power does that does not sound like ancient history at all. It tries to change the set times and the laws. Not destroy them. Change them. Redefine them. Shift the foundations of what humanity considers fixed, time itself and the laws that govern life, from the inside. That description is still being fulfilled. And the horn responsible for it is still active. Which means the 4th beast is not a closed chapter. It is the chapter we are living in right now. Before the numbers can mean anything, the precision has to be established. Because if you are going to trust a prophetic timeline, you need to know whether the source has earned the trust. And Daniel chapter 8 is where that trust gets built on a foundation that no honest skeptic can dismiss. This vision is different from the one in chapter 7. It is more specific, more surgical, and it was written centuries before the events it describes ever took place. That last point is not a claim made only by believers. Secular historians who wanted nothing to do with the Bible have confirmed the dating of Daniel's writings. The text predates its fulfillment. What Daniel recorded was not history dressed up as prophecy. It was prophecy that became history, exactly as written. So when Daniel chapter 8 speaks about what is still coming, the weight behind those words is not faith alone. It is a verified track record. The vision opens with a ram standing beside a river. 2 horns, one longer than the other, and the longer one grew up later. This ram charges in 3 directions, west, north, and south. Nothing can stop it. No army can stand against it. It does exactly what it wants and grows powerful beyond anything around it. Then from the west comes a goat, moving so fast its feet barely touch the ground. One large horn between its eyes. And this goat attacks the ram with a ferocity that Daniel describes as pure rage. The ram, for all its power, cannot withstand it. The goat shatters both horns and drives the ram into the ground. The angel Gabriel appears to Daniel and gives the interpretation directly. No guesswork required. The ram is Medo-Persia. The goat is Greece. The large horn is the first king. History supplied the name. Alexander the Great. Alexander crossed from Greece into Persia with a force that shattered the most powerful empire on earth at that time. He was undefeated across campaigns spanning from Greece to Egypt to the borders of India. He moved with a speed and precision that left entire nations with no time to respond. The ram could not stand against him. Exactly as Daniel wrote, centuries before it happened. But then something unexpected occurs inside the vision. At the peak of the goat's power, when it has grown greater than anything before it, the large horn is suddenly broken. Not weakened over time, not gradually diminished, broken, completely and without warning. And in its place, 4 horns grow up toward the 4 corners of the sky. Alexander died at 32 years old, at the absolute height of his power. At the moment his empire was larger than it had ever been. And when he died, his kingdom fractured into 4 parts, each one taken by a different general. 4 horns, 4 directions, written before a single one of them was born. Now here is where the temperature of this vision rises sharply. Out of one of those 4 horns, something smaller emerges, a little horn. And this one behaves differently from anything before it. It grows toward the south and the east and toward what the text calls the beautiful land. It reaches toward heaven itself. It challenges the commander of the heavenly army. It removes the daily sacrifice from the temple. It desecrates the place of worship. Historically, this points to a ruler named Antiochus Epiphanes, a Seleucid king who entered Jerusalem, stopped the temple sacrifices, set up a pagan altar inside the holy temple, and sacrificed an unclean animal on the altar of God. His self-given title, Epiphanes, meant God manifest. His own people called him something else entirely, Epimanes, the madman. He fulfilled the vision with a precision that silenced argument. But then Gabriel says something that refuses to stay in the past. In Daniel 8 verse 17, he looks directly at Daniel and delivers a statement that changes the entire scope of what was just described. Understand that this vision concerns the time of the end. Not a king coming in 2 centuries. Not a historical event to be recorded and filed away. The time of the end. And in verse 19 he repeats it. The vision concerns the appointed time of the end. Antiochus was a preview. A shadow cast forward from a greater reality still to come. The same pattern, desecration, arrogance, direct assault on the worship of God, pointing to something final. Something that carries the same fingerprint but operates on a scale that makes Antiochus look like a rehearsal. And that final fulfillment has not yet arrived in its completeness. Which means Daniel chapter 8 is not finished. And the number it contains, 2,300 days, is not the last number this prophecy produces. The last numbers come in chapter 12. And they function like nothing else in Scripture. They function like a clock. There is a power described across Daniel 7 and Daniel 8 that does not fit neatly into any single historical figure. And that is precisely the point. Because what Daniel describes is not just a person. It is a system, a spirit, a pattern of behavior that has appeared in different forms across centuries and is building toward a final, complete expression that the book of Revelation calls by another name entirely. But stay in Daniel for now, because what Daniel describes is specific enough to identify without needing outside sources. The little horn speaks. That is the first thing Daniel emphasizes, not its military power, not its economic control, its mouth, what it says, the way it positions itself against God through language, through redefinition, through the slow and deliberate reshaping of what people believe is true. Daniel 7 verse 25 gives 3 specific actions this power carries out. First, it speaks against the Most High, not secretly, openly, with a boldness that increases over time rather than pulling back when challenged. It does not hide its hostility toward God. It broadcasts it, wraps it in sophisticated language, and presents it as progress. Second, it oppresses the holy people of God, not through one dramatic moment of persecution alone, but through sustained, systemic pressure, the kind that does not make headlines every day but accumulates over time into something that reshapes what it means to live as a person of faith inside a hostile culture. Third, it tries to change the set times and the laws. That third one is the most important and the most overlooked. Times and laws, the two things that form the framework of human civilization. What is considered fixed? What is considered foundational? The calendar that governs worship, the moral framework that defines right and wrong, the legal structures that protect or expose the people of God. This power does not destroy those things through brute force. It changes them, redefines them, moves the boundaries so gradually that most people do not notice until the landscape looks completely different from what it once was. That description does not belong only to the ancient past. Look at the legal frameworks governing religious expression in Western nations over the last 50 years. Look at the redefinition of terms that were considered settled for centuries. Look at the institutional pressure applied to anyone who holds a biblical position on questions that were not considered questions a generation ago. The pattern Daniel described is not a historical artifact. It is a present reality. And here is what makes this deeply uncomfortable for anyone paying attention. The little horn does not look like an enemy from the outside. Daniel describes it as rising from within the existing system, from among the 10 horns, from inside the structure of power that already exists. It does not arrive as an obvious invader. It grows from within. And by the time it has uprooted 3 of the existing powers to make room for itself, the process is already complete. That is not a description of something coming from outside civilization to destroy it. That is a description of something rising inside civilization to redirect it. Now here is the tension that Daniel himself could not resolve. He watched this horn making war against the people of God. He watched it prevailing against them, winning, pushing back everything that stood in its way. And then Daniel 7 verse 22 records the moment everything shifts. The Ancient of Days takes his seat, and when he does, judgment is pronounced in favor of the holy people of the Most High. Not after they won the battle themselves. Not after they organized effectively enough or gathered enough influence to turn the tide. The shift comes from above. The court convenes. The books open. And the outcome that was always decided from the foundation of the world is finally made visible to everyone who doubted it was coming. But between the rise of that horn and the moment the Ancient of Days takes his seat, there is a period. A specific period. With a specific length. Measured in days. And those days are recorded in Daniel 12 with a precision that has puzzled the world's greatest biblical minds for centuries. Until now. Open the last chapter of Daniel and read it slowly. Not for the story, not for the comfort. Read it for the mathematics. Because what God places inside Daniel 12 are not round numbers chosen for symbolic beauty. They are not approximations. They are not poetic figures meant to convey a general sense of duration. They are specific, intentional, precise in a way that demands the question, why these numbers and not others? The chapter opens at the peak of a time of distress unlike anything that has occurred since nations first existed. The archangel Michael stands up. The dead are raised. And then Daniel hears a conversation between 2 heavenly figures standing on opposite banks of a river. One of them asks a single question. How long? That question echoes across the entire Bible. The prophets asked it. The Psalms ask it. The martyrs in Revelation cry it from beneath the altar. And here, in the final chapter of Daniel, it is asked in the context of the end of all things. The answer comes in Daniel 12 verse 7. A time, times, and half a time, when the power of the holy people has been finally broken, all these things will be completed. Prophetic literature across both testaments consistently reads that phrase as 3.5 years, and 3.5 prophetic years, using the biblical calendar of 360 days per year, produces 1,260 days. That number is the foundation, the base rhythm of the prophetic clock. But Daniel asks for more. He is not satisfied with what he has heard. And God gives him 2 additional numbers that do not restate the first. They extend beyond it. 1,290 days. That is 30 days longer than 1,260. 30 days past the end of the core period. Something happens at that marker specific enough that God attached an exact number to it. Then 1,335 days. 45 days beyond the first extension. 75 days total past the end of the base period. And here is where Daniel 12 verse 12 delivers one of the most striking statements in all of prophetic scripture. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. Blessed. That word is not decoration. It is the same category of language Jesus uses in the Beatitudes. Divine approval. Divine arrival. Something completed, received, and honored by God himself. God places a specific blessing on the person who reaches that final number. Which means reaching it is not guaranteed for everyone. Which means something between the start of that count and the end of it will make endurance necessary, costly, Something worth blessing. Now here is where the interpretive work begins. And this is where honesty matters more than impressiveness. There are two established methods for reading prophetic time periods in Scripture. The first is literal day counting, anchored to a specific historical event as the starting point. The second is the day for a year principle, used consistently in Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4 verse 6, where prophetic days represent calendar years and their fulfillment. Neither method is invented. Both are used within Scripture itself to interpret prophetic time. The question is which anchor point produces a convergence that aligns with other prophetic markers already established. Scholars working from events connected to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, specifically the removal of daily worship patterns and the establishment of what Daniel calls the abomination of desolation, have traced these numbers through centuries of careful calculation. The 7th century provides historically documented anchor points that connect directly to the language Daniel uses in his vision: the removal of the continual, the daily, and the placement of what desecrates the holy place. These are not vague theological concepts. They are events tied to specific moments in history that can be dated. When 1,290 years are counted forward from those anchor points, the timeline moves into the modern era with a precision that is difficult to attribute to coincidence. When 1,335 years are counted from the same starting points, the endpoint of that count, the number God attached a blessing to, lands in a window that centers on 2026. Not 2040. Not a generation from now. 2026. Now hear this carefully because this matters. This is not date setting. Scripture does not authorize declaring the day or the hour of Christ's return. That boundary is firm and it is not being crossed here. What this is a convergence. A moment where multiple prophetic threads, multiple numerical timelines, and multiple historical anchor points arrive at the same destination at the same time. That kind of convergence is not manufactured by selective reading. It is the result of following the text where it leads and refusing to stop when the destination becomes uncomfortable. And when Gabriel told Daniel that the vision concerns the appointed time of the end, that word appointed carries something specific in the original language. It means fixed, set, determined in advance. Something that was always going to arrive at a specific moment regardless of what happened in the centuries leading up to it. The only variable was never the timing. The only variable was whether the generation living inside it would recognize what they were standing in. And here is the thing about that generation, the one the numbers point toward, the one God attached a blessing to. Daniel was told something about them that he could never have fully processed beside that river. He was told they would need to endure to reach the end of the count, which means the count is already running. Numbers without context are just numbers. But when multiple independent lines of evidence point to the same destination, the destination stops being a guess and starts being a coordinate. That is what 2026 represents inside this prophetic framework. Not a date plucked from speculation. Not a number chosen because it sounds urgent. A coordinate produced by tracing multiple prophetic threads independently and watching them arrive at the same point. Here is how that works. The prophetic anchor point most consistently used by scholars studying Daniel's timeline is connected to events in the 7th century involving the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. In 637 AD, the Caliph Omar entered Jerusalem following the Islamic conquest and took control of the Temple Mount. The daily, the continual worship pattern that had defined that sacred space, was formally ended. The site where the temple had stood was repurposed. Daniel's language in chapter 12 connects directly to this kind of event. The removal of the daily. The placement of something in its place that desecrates what was holy. From 637 AD, count 1,290 years forward. You land in 1927. From 637 AD, count 1,335 years forward. You land in 1972. Those dates carry historical weight connected to the modern state of Israel and the geopolitical shifts surrounding Jerusalem that any student of modern history will recognize immediately. But the convergence does not stop at one anchor point. A second historically significant anchor connected to Daniel's language is 688 AD. This is the year construction began on the Dome of the Rock on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, an Islamic shrine built directly on the site where the Jewish temple once stood. If any structure in the modern world fits the description of something placed where it does not belong on holy ground, this is the structure that fits that description most precisely. From 688 AD, count 1,290 years forward. You land in 1978. From 688 AD, count 1,335 years forward. You land in 2023. Now add the generation principle from Matthew 24. When you see the fig tree putting out its leaves, know that the time is near. The fig tree as a symbol of Israel is consistent across prophetic scripture. The modern state of Israel was established in 1948. A biblical generation in scripture ranges from 70 to 80 years based on Psalm 90 verse 10. Counting 70 to 80 years from 1948 produces a window running from 2018 to 2028. 2026 sits at the center of that window. Now add the Jubilee cycle, God established a 50-year Jubilee pattern in Leviticus 25, a year of restoration, release, and return. The year 1967 marks the recapture of Jerusalem by Israel in the Six-Day War, one of the most significant prophetic events of the modern era. Many scholars mark that moment as a Jubilee anchor point. 50 years from 1967 lands in 2017. The next Jubilee cycle from that point lands in 2067. But the midpoint of that cycle, the point of greatest tension and transition, sits in the late 2020s. Thread after thread, anchor point after anchor point, all of them producing dates that cluster in the same narrow window. And 2026 appears at the intersection of more of those threads than any other single year in the modern era. Now here is the part of this that needs to be said with complete honesty. Prophetic timelines have been projected before. Dates have been named. And when those dates passed without the expected events, the damage to the credibility of prophetic study was real and lasting. That history cannot be ignored, and it will not be ignored here. What is being presented is not a prediction. It is a convergence of evidence that demands serious engagement rather than dismissal. The difference between a prediction and a convergence is the difference between someone saying, "I know exactly what will happen," and someone saying, "Everything I can measure from every direction is pointing here, and that is worth paying attention to." Gabriel's word to Daniel was appointed, fixed, set in advance. The appointed moment does not require human beings to calculate it correctly in order to arrive on schedule. It arrives because God determined it. Human calculation either recognizes it or misses it, but the moment itself is not dependent on whether anyone got the math right. What the math does is this: it positions the generation living inside the window to recognize what they are standing in rather than sleepwalking through it. And Daniel 12 verse 10 is explicit about who will and who will not recognize it. The wicked will not understand. The wise will. Not the academically brilliant. Not the prophetically sophisticated. The wise. Those who have oriented their lives around the fear of God rather than the noise of the age. Those who have kept their window open toward the promises of God even when the pressure to close it was enormous. That is the generation the numbers point toward. And there is one more thing Daniel saw about that generation that changes the way this entire vision lands. He did not just see what they would face, he saw what they would become. Most people who study Daniel 12 focus entirely on the distress. And the distress is real. Scripture does not soften it. A time of trouble unlike anything since nations first existed. That is not language designed to comfort. It is language designed to prepare. But Daniel 12 does not end with distress. And the generation living inside the open seal was never meant to read only the warning without reading what surrounds it. Because right before the numbers are given, right before the timeline is laid out, God places something in the text that is not a calculation. It is a promise, and it is addressed specifically to the people living inside the time of the end. Daniel 12 verse 3. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars, forever and ever. Read that again without rushing past it. Not survive, not endure, not barely make it through. Shine, like the brightness of the heavens, like stars, permanent, visible, unextinguishable by any power that rises against them. That promise is not reserved for people who lived in easier times. It is specifically placed inside a chapter describing the hardest time in human history. Because God does not give his greatest promises to generations facing the least resistance. He gives them to the generations that need them most. And then Daniel 12 verse 10 adds a layer that functions like a direct address. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined. But the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand. But those who are wise will understand. The same vision, the same numbers, the same converging threads of prophecy available to everyone. But only some will understand what they are seeing. Not because the information is restricted. The book of Daniel is in every Bible on earth. It has been translated into more languages than any other ancient document. It is freely available to anyone with a few minutes and an honest heart. But spiritual understanding is not the same as intellectual access. Reading the numbers is not the same as grasping what they mean. And grasping what they mean is not the same as allowing that understanding to change the way you live. The wise are not people who accumulated more prophetic knowledge than others. The wise, in the language of Hebrew scripture, are people who ordered their entire lives around the fear of God, who treated his word as the fixed point around which everything else organized itself, who, in the middle of disorienting times, did not trade the anchor for the noise. Those people will understand because they are positioned to understand. Their lives have been shaped by proximity to the one who holds the timeline. And here is where Daniel himself becomes the most important figure in this entire discussion. Not as a prophet delivering information, as a model for how to live inside an empire that is hostile to everything you believe. He kept his window open. That detail in Daniel 6 is not a small biographical note. It is the entire instruction manual for the generation living inside the open seal. When the pressure to conform was at its maximum, when the cost of faithfulness was most visible, Daniel did not close the window. He did not hide his faith behind a more acceptable version of itself. He opened the window toward Jerusalem, toward the promises of God, toward the word that had never failed him, and he prayed. Not dramatically, not performatively, just faithfully, same as he always had. That is the call for the generation living inside the numbers. Keep your window open. When the institutions around you redefine what they once held as settled, keep your window open. When the cultural pressure to soften your convictions reaches a level that feels unsustainable, keep your window open. When the count feels long and the waiting feels costly and the end of 1,335 days feels impossibly far away, keep your window open. Because Daniel 12 verse 12 is not just a number attached to a calendar. It is a blessing spoken by God himself over every person who endures to the end of the count. Blessed is the one who waits for and reaches the end of the 1,335 days. That word blessed means approved, received, welcomed, honored by the one who set the number in the first place. And the God who placed that blessing inside a sealed vision thousands of years ago did not do it casually. He did it because he knew exactly who would be alive to receive it. He did it because he saw you. And he wrote something else into the vision that Daniel only understood at the very end. Something personal, something tender, something that tells you exactly how this story ends for the people who kept their window open. After everything Daniel saw, after the visions and the numbers and the collapsed days on the ground worn out by the weight of things too large for any human being to carry, God speaks to him one final time. And the tone shifts completely. Daniel 12 verse 13. For words that carry more comfort than most people ever slow down long enough to receive. Go your way, Daniel. You have done your part. You carried what you were given. You recorded what I showed you. You wept for people you would never meet. You wrote a letter you would never see opened. Now rest. And then, and this is the part that matters, God does not leave it there. At the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. Your allotted inheritance. Not a general reward. Not a vague spiritual blessing. Something specific. Something with Daniel's name already on it. Already prepared. Already waiting on the other side of the end of days. That promise does not belong only to Daniel. It belongs to every person living inside the open seal who has kept their window facing the right direction. Every person who held the line when holding it was costly. Every person who endured through the count rather than walking away from the faith that made them a target in the first place. There is an inheritance on the other side, and it has your name on it. But there is one final thing this vision contains that changes everything about how you face what is coming next. And it starts with a question Daniel asked beside that river that nobody has fully answered. Daniel stood beside the river after everything had been spoken. The vision was complete. The numbers had been given. The timeline had been set. The angel had delivered everything God authorized him to deliver. And Daniel, the man who had never once been recorded as losing his composure under pressure, asked one final question. My Lord, what will the outcome of all this be? It is one of the most human moments in all of Scripture. A man who had just received the most significant prophetic revelation of his lifetime, who had been given numbers and timelines and descriptions of events stretching thousands of years into the future, and his honest response was, I still do not fully understand this. And God's answer was not more information. It was permission. Go your way. The words are sealed until the time of the end. For thousands of years, that seal held. Empires rose and fell. The Roman Empire collapsed and reformed. The Dark Ages came and lifted. The Reformation split the Western Church. 2 world wars reshaped every border on the map. The state of Israel was reborn in a single day after 2,000 years. Jerusalem returned to Jewish control for the first time since the Babylonian exile. And through all of it, the seal held. Scholars tried to break it open through intellect. Prophecy teachers built elaborate systems around it. Timelines were drawn and then abandoned. Dates were named and then passed. And the vision remained partially opaque. Not because God was hiding something, but because the conditions required to make it fully legible had not yet arrived. Those conditions are arriving now. Not all at once. Not in a single dramatic moment that removes all ambiguity, but in the way that a sealed letter becomes readable not when you force it open but when the light is finally right. The convergence of prophetic threads pointing toward 2026 is not the only thing happening right now that carries the fingerprint of Daniel's vision. The systems consolidating power across Western governments carry the fingerprint of the fourth beast. The pressure being applied to biblical convictions inside legal and institutional frameworks carries the fingerprint of the little horn changing times and laws. The acceleration of events that prophetic scripture describes as signs of the end carries the fingerprint of a generation that is not simply living in history but living inside a specific, appointed, irreversible moment of it. And Daniel 12 verse 4 adds one more detail that most readers walk past without stopping. In the time of the end, many will go here and there to increase knowledge. That phrase has been applied to travel, to the information age, to the explosion of human knowledge over the last century. All of those applications have merit, but the original language carries something more specific, a restlessness, a searching, A moving from place to place and source to source looking for something that satisfies, something that explains what is happening, something that makes the disorientation of the age make sense. That restlessness is everywhere right now. People are searching. They can feel that something has shifted even if they cannot name what it is. They can sense that the world they are navigating does not operate the same way it did a generation ago. The foundations feel less fixed. The certainties feel less certain. The institutions that were supposed to hold feel like they are under a pressure they were not designed to withstand. That feeling is not anxiety without cause. That feeling is the generation Daniel wept for waking up inside the vision he sealed for them. And the God who sealed it is the same God who is present in this moment. Not distant. Not watching from a position of detached sovereignty. Present. Active. Speaking into the lives of people who have kept their window open long enough to hear. The Ancient of Days will take his seat. That moment is coming with the same certainty that every other moment in Daniel's visions arrived. The court will convene. The books will open. And the outcome that was decided before the first beast ever rose from the water will be made visible to a creation that was never meant to be governed by anything other than the kingdom that has no end. Daniel rested knowing his inheritance was secure. You can too. But here is what nobody who studies this vision ever fully addresses. There is something else in Daniel 12 that was sealed inside the numbers. Something that does not show up on the timeline charts. Something hidden not in the length of the days but in what those days are counted from. And when you see what the count actually begins with, the 2026 convergence stops being the most important number in the chapter. Something else takes its place, and that changes everything.